Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
This is our Racial Justice Equality Commission meeting, July the 5th, 2023. And the meeting is called to order. We'll start with our committee reports. Racial Equality, Mr. Tim Johnson.
You might want to move him to last.
Yeah, he's last.
Okay, we'll move right along. The Law Enforcement and Justice and Accountability.
All right. Not sure how in-depth I'm supposed to go on my reporting, but we'll try to capture as much as possible. Our meeting, last meeting was on June the 1st, 2023. The meeting was called to order at 3:31 p.m. It was attended by Mr. Whitaker, Mr. Phil John, Kennedy Wells Chair, and Ms. Tiffany Brown, LFUCG Staff Liaison. Dr. Serenity Wright was unable to attend. Purpose statement was recited by Chair Wells, systems not people, improvement not punishment. We offered a public expression of sympathy, condolences to the family of fallen Scott County Sheriff Deputy Caleb Conley, the law enforcement community, and the Lexington and Central Kentucky community as a whole. Continued prayers. We got into the flock safety program discussion, and the gist of that discussion was to accumulate a list of questions for Commander Matthew Greathouse, who is sort of the lead or liaison for the Lexington Police Department. We had prior discussion about generating a list of questions for Commander Greathouse with the hope of getting those answered by our August meeting. Questions confirm like cities, municipalities using the flock system, inclusive of police department size and scope. Contact for clarification on that question is the committee chair. Second question, companion public safety programs being utilized by the Lexington Police Department in addition to the flock system. Number 3, is there a formula used to determine the number, parenthetically, placement of flock system camera by district? Number 4, third-party integration with data harvesting and the impact on cellular networks. Number 5, we posed a question around fuses, a deeper dive into this aspect of the program and the ability of residents and businesses, ability to tap into fuses. Also wanted to open up about the $150,000 allocation in the fiscal year 24 city budget for launch and/or expansion involving fuses. Number 6, signage. What is the public safety response to the installation of signage to elevate the level of transparency with what the physical flock safety program cameras are with where the physical flock safety program cameras are? Not specific to just residents of Lexington, but the responsibility of people visiting our city. Just to clarify that a little, most of the time when you go into businesses, they'll have a notification you're being monitored, or they'll have some type of signage indicating that you are being monitored in some form or fashion. We don't currently have that with the flock system. Number 7, last question, establishment of a regular rotation of community forums and conversations to demonstrate transparency and provide information as it relates to the flock safety program. We ended up with 2 recommendations coming out of our June 1st meeting. Number 1, our first recommendation was the original Leisure Committee recommendations, number 2, number 14, and numbers 17 through 25. Our recommendation was to transition those to the full RJEC for further vetting due to the Leisure Committee's limited purview and lack of statutory authority to adequately address those recommendations. Leisure Committee Chair and myself will work with RJEC Chair and Director Brown to answer questions, determine details of that transition, and outline expected outcomes of transitioning the listed recommendations to the full RJEC for further vetting. Any ongoing or new developments related to the listed recommendations will be monitored by the current Leisure Committee and reported back to the full RJEC in addition to the RJEC's vetting. Second recommendation was about the flock safety program signage. We not only presented it as a question to Commander Greathouse, but we also wanted to move it forward just for the purposes of fast tracking, I guess. So flock safety program signage, a formal proposal to install signage on the physical cameras to increase the level of transparency for residents of Lexington as well as for people visiting our city. Public comment, none. Final comment, update from Director Brown. The RJEC will release their annual report as required by ordinance and is set for October. More information will be covered at the July 5th RJEC meeting. Next meeting of the Leisure Committee will be August 3rd at 3:30 p.m. Meeting adjourned at 4:06 p.m. Lastly, committee progress and next steps. Submit questions to Commander Matthew Greathouse with the goal of having those questions answered and or explained by the August 3rd Leisure Committee meeting. Secondly, and lastly, follow up with Director Brown regarding the Prosecutor Center for Excellence being contacted or contracted by the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office to do a review of that office and pursuing a meeting with Kimberly Baird or representative of that office to visit the Leisure Committee to provide further updates or specific details regarding the timeline of that review, completion of that review, and the results of that assessment. That's the report, Madam Chair, from the Leisure Committee.
Thank you. Okay. Questions, comments?
Question, Abdul. So it sounded to me that there was a lot in there about, I guess, this committee, like reviewing and or, I don't know, I think I heard the word ownership, or not ownership, but overseeing some of that. And I guess my question is that, should we be, when you say overseeing it, like overseeing what they do, or are you saying just kind of reviewing what they've done to make sure it's, I don't want to say compliant, but make sure that it's aligned with what we're wanting to see the city go? I guess that's the only clarity question.
Just clarify for me as far as they. You said they. Who is
they being the it was the flock safety program that's where it's housed at and owned at now.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like to me that was it stated that it was proposed that maybe we look at that program just to make sure that it's I guess compliant, if for lack of better words. Or
It's not so much about compliance as much as just ongoing oversight to ensure that there's transparency when it comes to the program. Also, it's a preventative measure in terms of combating the possibility of misinformation. I know from a community standpoint, there probably will be ongoing questions about the level of surveillance. We've become a surveilled society. So when you have that prevalence of surveillance, there will always be sort of the conspiracy theory, big brother's watching me. So I think it's incumbent upon not only the Leisure Committee, but this full commission to sort of maintain that oversight when it comes to complying, if for use of your word, with what they promised it would deliver. Taking that a step further, I do think there are other components to public safety that should extend beyond the flock safety program. Thus the questions we had for Commander Greathouse, which that was the number one question. Number two question, I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Sure.
You were talking about the signage. Now, wouldn't that be defeating the purpose of letting the public know where the flock cameras are at? Because I would say, well, I'm not going to commit my crime here. I'll go somewhere else because I see there's signage saying that there are flock cameras. So I would go to another area. I mean, that's just my thinking. Why would you let people know where the flock cameras are?
And if you listen to the actual wording on the question regarding signage, the question we have for Commander Greathouse was, what is the public safety response? And by public safety, we are referring to, in this specific case, the Lexington Police Department. I guess there is an intelligence aspect to it. So how much intel do you want to share with the community at large? Something that probably wouldn't otherwise have come up is, what does that mean in terms of visitors to our city? Not only the local residents, but also visitors to our city. Should they be aware of being surveilled and us not? Us, I feel I'm part of the city, so yeah. What is the response? I don't know that. Commander Greathouse will have to give that to us.
Well, I think there was a miss in language here, because I think your report said not to identify where the cameras are, but that there are cameras in the community as a whole, right? Like when you were reading the report, that's what I heard. That's how I heard it.
That was one component of it, but when you look at surveillance as a whole, when you just as a layperson, when you look at it, there's usually always some type of notification that you're being surveilled. What this is, I don't know, closed circuit, or you're being video recorded, and that's not in place not only for flock safety, but any other type of surveillance apparatus that our public safety officials have in place.
Can I chime in?
Sure.
That's usually on private property. So in the public, there's no expectation of privacy. So that would be the legal argument for not having signage in a public place, because there's no expectation of privacy. So I just wanted to mention that. But that's the only time you really see that is at a private establishment.
But your point is well taken, and that's part of the question for Commander Greathouse, in the sense of what is their response to signage. If, Chair Turley has indicated that there could be an issue from a crime prevention standpoint if the public at large knows what those are, what they're doing, then it could defeat the purpose. But I want him to tell me that. I'm not going to speak for everybody else. I'm just going to speak for me. I want Commander Greathouse to say, no, that kind of defeats the purpose of the program. Maybe he should be able to expand upon that, as far as not just saying that, because that's kind of maybe the easy way out, is to just say, well, it defeats the purpose of the program. But does it somehow work? Is it counterproductive when it comes to transparency? Is it in terms of the impact on marginalized groups? Is there a potential negative impact of that? Because we understand maybe the number of cameras that are in certain areas. So yeah, all those questions sort of come to mind.
I have a comment. So there's a couple issues with it, and I don't think everybody's comfortable on the same page. There's a prevention measure that should be addressed. How are we preventing crime rather than gotcha crime, or transparency as well? And those questions are very good in my opinion. Give them an opportunity to answer those questions. What's the data says? If people do know those signs are there, will it create prevention of crime? Saying, if I'm out here, well, I probably shouldn't do this crime because there's a camera watching me. Versus, does it do better with crime if people don't know and I catch you later and I'm in an unmarked police car, or I have a hidden camera somewhere? So those are great questions. I think they should be able to present that data to us and say, which one's better? Which one's better for our society as a people? Just because there's an expectation, not to take away, an expectation of not having privacy in public, it still doesn't mean it's okay. Because when you're in one community that's being surveilled more than others, that makes it unfair, unequitable. Where are the cars being stolen from? Are they being nice cars from a nice neighborhood? Or are they being cars that's in neighborhoods that less expensive cars, you know? Most likely they're still in nicer cars, so the camera should be there. But it's not, and we know this. The cameras are in neighborhoods where the historical red line has been, of housing, of people without access and opportunity, the marginalized communities. I think they ought to just answer these questions for us and help me understand better. Because prevention, people look over prevention. We're looking at, I'm gonna catch you after you do it.
And a good question to ask also, how are other cities doing it? Are they using signage, or are they
That's the camera.
just locating them?
I did some high level research, and you know, I won't name cities, but it goes to the question of, and I think that's always sort of the fallback, is public versus private. But I still don't think that always addresses the question of transparency, especially when it comes to how surveilled marginalized communities are. And really, for my purposes, it's just more so increasing that level of transparency. If Commander Greathouse, the Lexington Police Department, can answer that question, then yeah, it's answered, and as far as I'm concerned, it's answered. So
I just want to, when the representatives from that program came and spoke to us, they talked about one of the reasons why they didn't give the location of the cameras was because they were being damaged. So when people found them, they damaged the cameras, which was really sort of an expense to the department. So I don't know what the answer is. I'm just saying that they did speak to that a little bit, that when people find them, they damage them and they can't use them. But I think your point is very well taken, is that where's the data to say where do we need the cameras, and are those the areas in which the cameras are being used? Like, those are, to me, that's the bigger question, is where's the data that tells us where the cameras should be to get the information that we need, not the gotcha and not the, you know, but are we really using them appropriately? So that's all I wanted to say.
I'm wondering too, and this might be something that your group has already spoken about too, if we could build a set of recommendations that are, when we talk about the word compliance, what is the compliance? What would be our expectations, or what would be some standards that we would suggest through the racial equity lens? That's the kind of thing that we can't necessarily oversee, but we might be able to use the leverage to have something adopted as standards or expectations.
Yeah, and that's why I asked the question originally, because we can't oversee that.
No.
We have no power to hold anyone accountable. We just make recommendations, and so that's why I really asked the question ahead of time. It was because of that. It's like we're a body that makes recommendations to those that can hold people accountable.
And I imagine after you have these questions answered, that, you know, some expectations or standards might be able to be illuminated that we could potentially put forward.
yeah, Commander Greathouse was scheduled to actually visit with the Leisure Committee at the June 1st meeting, but just, you know, based on schedule conflicts, but also it just so happened that particular day was the day that they laid to rest Sheriff Deputy Conley. So a lot of the law enforcement community was obviously engaged in that. So the plan all along was to have him meet with us in person, virtually, but this was the next best thing as far as getting the information to him, so we can get these questions answered in a timely fashion. And to answer your question, obviously it will illuminate a lot of things once we hear back from him regarding these questions.
Add one more thing. I think holding someone accountable or overseeing compliance, that's one thing, but being able to ask questions is very powerful. And I think this body has the opportunity to ask questions and to get real questions, you know, that maybe the community wants to know. And it makes people defend their views, you know, or avoid. And when they avoid a question, you know, it gives you an answer there as well. So just want to reiterate, coming up with these questions are a great opportunity for us to help the community understand.
Anyone else? We'll move on to the educational and economic opportunities. Mr. Castro?
Thank you, ma'am. We met through Zoom on June 7th, 2023, and may I to that date, I turned 60, exactly that day. So, well, they won't talk about that because I have to already apologize to Ms. Stephanie Brown in my written report. I completely forgot that she was there, and I named a lot of people, but not, so I'm sorry, ma'am. We were in attendance, Mr. Bob, Sam, Mr. Marshall Appeals, Ms. Lori Davis from the Lexington Public Library was there. She didn't make any comment. And our special guest was Ms. Sharon Price. She's the Executive Director of Community Action Council. I happened to be talking to her about a totally different subject when the subject of education came, especially after-school programs, including also Head Start and Early Head Start. So we reviewed some of the recommendations that were given originally by the initial commission, and we looked at some of the areas where the city has already implemented some programs. And we looked at education, and it seemed like the city hadn't done anything. So I invited Ms. Price, and much to my surprise, Ms. Price gave us an incredible report as to what the Community Action Council has been doing, has done and is doing in the area of education. They have been able to focus on several recommendations with the help of many local and state entities. We looked at recommendation 1, for example, which is to build an integrated system of early childhood education that addresses the need of children, adults, and families. She pointed out that Community Action Council is already working with representatives to Reginald Thomas and others and to address this issue.
It's amazing.
So sorry.
Yeah.
With your nice ringtone.
Okay, drum in, kick in.
I'm
I'm so sorry.
And then the horns came in.
So sorry, right. I knew the first drum beat. I was like, oh no.
And I must apologize because when I read, I turn my hearing aids off because I can hear myself about what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
It's horrible. And so I tuned you out. I never heard it.
Everyone else got it.
That's the beauty.
Now, that's classic. I heard that.
No, I never heard you. So, moving on. As I was saying, Ms. Price told us that she's already working with Reginald Thomas and other education experts to address this issue. And the idea is to identify how the city can work together with the state on certain issues. And this one is one of them. It is that building of an integrated system for early childhood education. She said that unfortunately or fortunately, we cannot go at it alone. And so we need to build these partnerships. But what comes after that was incredible. So we jumped into recommendation 5, which is create a meaningful after-school opportunity for youth that allows us to better prepare them for the school system. And that's all I was expecting her to answer. She went on to many things. For example, Community Action Council has applied for a grant for a new facility, and they are just waiting for approval to use the funds. There has been groundbreaking already, and this new facility is going to be right across from William Wells Brown Elementary, to which Mr. Sam goes, that's what's going on. Anyway, so they already are starting to move into that education. I think Community Action Council will be a fantastic partner to this commission because of all the things that they're doing. However, one of the things that she pointed out is, actually Mr. McLaughlin, Bob, asked, do the people that qualify for after-school program or early childhood, do they take advantage of it? And to my surprise, she said no. Many families of children that could take advantage of these programs feel that there's an additional value for the children to stay home with family before having to attend school. Many keep their children at home even though they qualify for many of the services. Great. And so we looked at, for example, the Swahili community. They tend to keep their kids until they absolutely have to send them to first grade. The other thing that we realized is that Community Action Council does not have a shortage of available program. What they have is shortage of available people. The national issue that we're really dealing with, and that's a national teacher shortage. For example, they cannot find Swahili, bilingual Swahili teachers, because unfortunately in the Swahili community, the wife is expected to stay home, which they may be fantastic to help us bridge that gap, especially of children. And I brought this up of my own community. My community tend to keep their kids, the Hispanic community tend to keep their kids at home, and that hindered them into going into first grade because their English is deficient, and therefore they're not ready to. So she was quick to point out that 92% of the children in early Head Start and Head Start students actually are on grade when they arrive. So the programs show that there is a need, and it's a reality that we as a community need. Ms. Price also went on to point out that they're working, because of how they build their programs, they're also looking at recommendation number 2, which is institute a whole family approach to education and economic family progression. Community Action Council uses that approach. They try to bring in and include the parents, or at least the moms. We see that the fathers are not necessarily involved, but moms tend to be involved in more numbers. And so they're using that to get them used to the education system, to get them used to being part of their kids' educational progress, to be involved. As we all know, the more involved the parents in the school life of their children, the better the outcome. I can only tell you, Bryan Station, the parents that are involved are the parents that see their kids graduating well and moving on to college. So we need to start that early, and Community Action Council is already doing that. And she finalized with recommendation number 4, which is to create an educational community that is culturally and linguistically inclusive. As I indicated, they're trying to work with the Swahili community, because that seems to be one of the biggest communities in need. We realized that during COVID, because they stay within themselves and they don't mix with the rest of us. And so we're trying to get them to be part of their sweet people. And as I pointed out, I was invited to one of their dinners, and it's fantastic food. Of course, I shouldn't say that because I eat all the food, but this one was explicitly fantastic. However, the problem is identifying teachers, identifying volunteers, identifying the human resource capital. They have the facilities, they have the programs, and they have the ability to. She was saying, I think at one point, that their waiting list is incredible, and all they need is people to help them be in the classroom. It's not that they don't have classrooms. It's not that they don't have facilities. It's that unfortunately they don't have the human resources to interact. I put in my report that this subcommittee thanks Ms. Sharon Price for her time and great report regarding what the Community Action Council is doing. Their biggest need right now is linked to human resources. They could always use more volunteers and paid individuals to help them with existing needs of their students and student population in Fayette County. Any questions?
I'm trying to figure out how to word this, Chair Turley, if I can ask a question.
I have to turn it off. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. In terms of resource needs, and I don't know if this is something you could just carry back maybe as a casual conversation to Ms. Price, is the utilization of colleges and universities locally.
I am so happy that you asked that question.
Trancy, EKU.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we pointed it out. We have EKU, UK, Trancy, Midway, Kentucky State. What we now need to, and that's what she said, if we could help her identify those potentials. Asbury is dying to, and yet nobody's reaching out to them. I have reached to, now she is provost. She was the Dean of Education at EKU. Now she's the Provost at Asbury. But anyway, yes, what I'm gonna try to do, and we're gonna be part of one of the recommendations, is that we facilitate those connections. We have the resources. We have great institutions. We're graduating some of the most fantastic teachers. However, they don't get exposed to classroom until they do their classroom, the student teaching, which is sometimes to the very end. And one, a friend of mine that decided to leave education, she said, if I had been exposed to that a little bit earlier, I would have realized that that's not her calling. It wasn't. My kids, on the other hand, 2 daughters, they knew from day one that they wanted to be teachers. They are still teachers. What happened is, that was what we did. We need to, as a commission, we may need to do the connecting, because there's great schools, but nobody is looking at how we can partner with them. And Ms. Sharon Price says she just doesn't have the right connections with the schools to reach out to them. But we pointed out exactly that.
So I just want to make a comment. I think the connections is a fantastic idea. BCTC, what they did this summer is they brought a group of sophomores. I think we had freshmen and sophomores, and then 1 week was juniors and seniors, but they brought them to UK, and there was a panel discussion on all types of healthcare jobs that we were doing, and they just gave them an opportunity to ask questions, what are your interests, and just expose them to all the different healthcare careers. So maybe this is something that the other institutions could certainly do and say, we offer, these education, like do something along that way, but get them in high school and get them these experiences of different jobs. So like obviously healthcare, where there's a shortage, and so we're trying to get people interested, but doing that in high school, and that's very much to your point of getting people out there and knowing. I'll just say for myself, like, I didn't know what all the opportunities were when I went to college, and you spend a lot of time trying to figure that out and learning. And so I think if we could do a pipeline kind of thing through high school for different education, healthcare, then that might be an avenue to get people to the right institution for the education.
Yep, fantastic idea. Unfortunately, the meeting was in June, and schools were winding down. Mm-hmm. However, for example, EKU is putting together Camino Camp, which is for seniors, juniors and seniors to come to the university, especially linked with the Hispanic community. And that will be a good place for us to look at how many of you are thinking and going to education. Let's go visit Community Action Council and reach for the other communities, because there's other communities that are there that we don't know, and they may be fantastic volunteers at first, and it also validates their choice to go into the classroom early enough that they know what they want to do. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Questions, comments? Okay, moving right along. Housing and gentrification. That's me. Okay. There still is, as I said the last meeting, an ongoing problem with the public not knowing about the program or even how it works. So I talked to Commissioner Lannert, and he put me in contact with the housing advocacy, Miss. We talked today, and hopefully my committee will get together with her and work on some plans to probably try to help. She was aware of it too, that people are not knowing or accessing the affordable housing because they don't know anything about it. And like you know, we have online the website or whatever, but a lot of people still don't know about it or understand it. As a matter of fact, a couple of housing apartments that we were building, they are calling people. Well, one lady called me, I'm in contact with her, and asked me, could you get me some applicants? Do you know anybody that needs an apartment? And I said, I think, the city is building all this. A matter of fact, Kearney Creek is taking applications, and a friend of mine, she applied, and they asked her, well, can you find us some people, because we need to get these places filled up. They even have a pool out there. This is on Kearney Creek, that's off of Georgetown Road. So she agreed with me that is a problem, and people not understanding the problem. And like I told her, I said, some people get on me really bad because they said, well, how is this affordable housing? And it's still $800 a month. I said, well, that's one bedroom, one person, but in the fair market, your apartment might cost $1,500. The ones on Russell Cave are beautiful. Kearney Creek is even having a swimming pool. So the problem that we're still dealing with is trying to let the public become aware that there is affordable housing and to understand the problem, the process. Because the Section 8 vouchers is one of the biggest things that they don't understand. You know, it's a three-step thing. It's affordable, but if you have a Section 8 voucher, it's even a little bit more affordable. But they're not giving out the vouchers. So she agreed with me. So I'm going to see if my committee, our committee, will meet with her sometimes next week. She's going to give me her schedule and see. Because these nice apartments are being built. They're not getting applicants. And that's a problem because you hear a lot of people saying we need housing, and they're not aware of the affordable housing. Now the update on Kearney Creek, that's what I just said. They're hunting for people to move in these apartments. Newtown Pike, they're still under construction. They're asking people, do you know anybody? We need to fill up these apartments. We are constructing, but we don't have any people to move in. So she agreed that maybe we can do some advertisement, or she said even maybe take it to the council to see if they could, you know, earmark some money or whatever. But that's the main problem, that people are not aware of the program and how it works. So Mr. Marshall, he's been working with this and Mr. Quinn on that, and he'll tell you the report. But
so yeah, the fact that I did a little research and then also had some assistance from Quinn Mulholland. Pretty sure this is his name. Hope I didn't screw that up. I have here a document that we created. It's a 5-page document, and it's full of all of the different resources that Lexington residents have at their disposal. And so I put it together and I organized it from a standpoint of emergency shelter and eviction to housing repair to resources and program referrals, and that's from case management to discrimination, legal housing assistance, assessment and referral services, treatment services, and these pages are really sticking together. And the last one, rent and utility assistance. There are a ton of programs available. So it's really kind of a two-pronged issue. Number one, people don't know that the programs exist. Number two, people don't know the parameters of the program so that they can participate in them. And so this document will stand to help educate folks on all of the different resources that are available. I've created a version that can be printed like this one, and there's also in the top right corner, there's a QR code that can be scanned, and there are buttons in that electronic document that will allow them to hyperlink to sections of this. Because let's be honest, not all of us are very comfortable when they receive a bunch of paperwork or a bunch of documentation to go through it. So to have the electronic copy that will allow them to quickly sort through. But as Vice Chair Turley said, getting the word out is probably the most important thing we can do right now. And then also making sure that people are well informed on how they can participate. So we can circulate this. I will send it to everyone here. I'd love to get your feedback, thoughts, comments. This is not the final version, but the goal is to create this document and then partner with all of the points of dissemination from family resource centers to existing brick and mortar locations for interaction with the public, and make sure that they have access to this I'm envisioning even posters that have the QR code and some information, but whatever we can do to help get the word out as fast as possible, because as we sit here and talk, there are folks right now who don't know if in the next 2 or 3 days they'll have a place to live. There are also folks that have the ending period of their Section 8 voucher who might not have used it. And then the waiting list, it's still a substantially long period for Section 8 vouchers, is that correct?
It may be 4 or 5 years. I had a lady said she waited 8 years to get on Section 8. So
we have these time boundaries. So anything we can do to get the word out as fast as possible is definitely one of the things that we can help either help facilitate or recommend a way to help facilitate.
You know, I was just listening, and I earlier today I had an organization come to my place of employment asking me basically to donate funds to the organization because they're doing a lot of advocacy outreach. And we're very proud of the fact that they had helped secure $13 million from the city for the housing fund. And so extremely proud in that voice that I heard an hour ago. And so now here I am an hour later, and I hear it's $13 million in the fund, but nobody knows about the housing that's available. And that common denominator is the city, right? So I'm sitting here thinking, so can we make a proposal that we ask the city maybe to pull together all the neighborhood organizations where a lot of these individuals tend to live, right? Just bring together all the presidents for each neighborhood association, and maybe they need to have a monthly meeting for the first 90 days and then a quarterly meeting thereafter, just to start to push the narrative that now we've put all this millions of dollars into this fund and houses are being built, and guess what? They're now available. There shouldn't be nobody asking where are these people at because we need them to move into these houses. That should not be happening. So my proposal would be, can we make a proposal to the city immediately, to the council tomorrow, to say, hey, can you all bring a meeting together? They will come if the mayor asks them to come. They will take off work. They will do what they need to do to get in a meeting, even with a council member, and sit down and say, here's our problem. We need you to help disseminate this information out into the community immediately.
Well, that's what we'll be getting with Miss Kissick. She's the housing advocate for the city. So I'll let you all know, the committee, when she can meet with us, because she also proposed maybe we go to the council and do something to help get the word out, because we don't want to overstep our boundaries. We're a commission.
We're a commission, though. We make recommendations to the council, though, right? So my thing is, we can meet with her whenever but we can still make the recommendation to the council tomorrow. I mean, because we keep talking about this, and now the houses, now I'm hearing like houses are being built, and they're like, hey, where the people at? Like, that should not be happening.
Exactly. So hopefully she'll guide us through that, and she can take that to the council, and we can make proposals, because she too understands that there is a problem with people not knowing. Now, don't understand why, but.
Well, can they share what their current avenue is for informing the public? I'll be curious to know that.
She didn't state that today, but I'll be in contact with her tomorrow and see, because the whole thing, I hear people say, well, it's on the website. A lot of our vulnerable citizens here, because they don't have computers, they don't have the access to go on the website, so it needs to be more outreach to that. So hopefully she's the actual advocate for that program.
And there are things already in place, like I know even known about it from my end. I know United Way has 211. I know like we have McKinney-Vento students that are families that are looking for resources. So I'd just be curious if it's just the website. I think part of their recommendation is also just evaluating in general outreach to community, so it can be accessible.
So I want to make a comment. So I think maybe getting the word out is certainly lacking but I also think people sometimes don't have the capacity to be able to navigate the systems that they need to be able to navigate to get this done on their own. So they get an application and it's 3 and 4 pages long and it goes in the trash.
Right.
They need physical help to get this done, and so like they need some navigators, they need someone on their side, and I know some places have those people, but I just don't know that they're available in a way that's helpful for the majority of the people who need the help. And so I think that's something that we need to think about as a commission, like what would be our recommendation to the city to make that an easier process for everyone.
That's one thing I shared with her about that some people cannot navigate the system. I filled out probably 5 applications for people for the affordable housing, and it's like 5 pages long.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. So that is really a problem that we need to look at, because to help them navigate, because, you know, we have the community centers that have, I think this Charles Young Center has computers, or you have access, but if you don't know how to use them, or access or navigate, or even fill out the paper application. So that's something that I'll be sharing with her to see what we can come up with, and with you all, and find out.
I'd like for us to consider too, as we're looking at, and that's a theme in what everybody's talking about, is that there's information that needs to go out, but the systems are complex. But I would also like to say that if I knew, okay, this form is 5 pages long, it's complicated, and it's gonna be 8 years, like, what is my level of trust that it's worth it? That it's, because it's emotionally taxing to do something like that.
Right.
And so what can we do that not only disseminates information, but where there is trust?
Exactly.
And where there is maybe even a little bit, I struggle to use the word hope in something like that. But to know that, you know, there's communication that needs to happen, but also it needs to be in a high trust environment.
Right.
And so that goes back, again, thinking about the health, the community health workers, the libraries, churches, things like that. So yes, having somebody, you know, tell you that there is a form, but is there an opportunity for some kind of peer counseling that helps people get through it, and the person, you know, if you help somebody through it, then you get some kind of incentive as well. Is there something that we can do where it's also supporting trust?
Right, and that's true. The Urban County government is doing exactly what they've said that they're doing. They're on track with, I don't have my actual recommendation forms. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing, the affordable housing. But getting people into the affordable housing programs, that's the thing that we need to look at. And like I said, they're doing a good job building the houses and everything, but, you know, like I said, apartment places are asking people, can you give us some people? We need to fill this up. So when I meet
And
with
that's
them-
probably effective peer-to-peer.
Right.
Because you've already been through the place, you know that we're gonna say yes to you. You're more likely to bring in a friend, and that friend is gonna believe you that they can get it.
Right. I took a tour with the Russell Cave apartments. They're beautiful, beautiful. And the lady, when I got ready to leave, she said, well, can you send some people out here? Because we need to get this place filled up. And they're beautiful. I mean, the 3-bedroom is actually bigger than my house. They have walk-in showers, 2 bathrooms, 2 full bathrooms, washer and dryer, full-size hookup, granite top counter. It's just awesome. And the square footage, it's amazing. And like I said earlier, Kearney Creek even has a swimming pool. But we can't get the people. That's a problem. So
And that-
we'll be working on that.
I'd love for us to also look at not just what information needs to go out, but I would love for us to reach people to say, you know, we've heard that the systems are complicated, but what else might be detracting from success of these programs, and hearing from people directly?
Yeah, and I'd like to recommend that maybe we split out and get to some of these neighborhood organization meetings. We need to find out what their schedule is and then make a commitment that I will put one on my calendar. As crazy as it is, I will still find time to get out and listen. Just to say, hey, I'm on the commission, just want to listen in about housing. Let random communication and talk. And if we did that and enough of those, now you feet on the ground, we can listen, and then we can be more informative, come back in here, because really, with all the effort that's been put into addressing housing in Lexington, a lot has been put in, right? To hear that part of it is kind of, it's really sad, actually.
And that builds trust in us as well.
Absolutely.
It's multi-directional.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
one thing that I did, I think may help with the Fayette County schools, I sub part-time at Fayette County Schools. So I was talking to the resource lady at Booker T. She had no clue about affordable housing. She said, well, Ms. Turley, people come to me all the time looking for housing. She said, I need to get involved in this program. She said, well, we have a meeting during the summer with all the resource coordinators, and she's going to inform them about the affordable housing. So I'll be in touch with her. So every school, every resource center in Fayette County, well, and Mr. Mewes said he's going to do that too, to know when they come to the resource center, they help with utilities, food, clothing, they help, but they didn't know anything about the housing. So when I shared that with her, she said that will be known in Fayette County schools.
We need that document.
Right, and that document.
I think that's good but the underlying thing is for sustainability of a system to service a community that needs access to resources, there has to be some type of accountability for, and I say avenue of outreach in a very broad sense of communication and contact and building capacity of those that are supporting families. I mean, I agree, and I'm whatever's needed with the commission, but I think we have to still go back to, if we weren't, same people were not in this seat in the commission 2-3 years from now, how are we sustaining a system that is truly reaching the community? And I think we have to go back to that.
So, piggyback on everybody. I mean, it sounds like there's a communication issue. We're not engaging the unengaged in a purposeful, marketable way. And the city, who should be the owner and should actually share the plan, or at least make a plan saying this is exactly how we're going to reach the community, or this is what we've been doing, so they can learn where it's not working. Because we got child care, and they said people are not taking advantage of preschool. I think it's because they don't know. People don't know housing, not because they don't want it, they don't know. But I've also was actually at a commission, at a meeting a year ago about this time, why a lot of people in the black community don't go to these places to fill out these applications, because they don't feel like it's for them. And then the white community does go and get it because they feel they're entitled to it, that it is for them. So a lot of black community go in there, they start the paperwork, they go through 5 pages, they don't get it, and then they leave, word of mouth, don't even waste your time going in there. And therefore, the unengaged community has grown. And this is what they were saying to me. And I was like, wow, I didn't know. So people are taking advantage of it that feel like it's for them. And so I think it's on the city that we can ask the question, what marketing plan are you doing on purpose to reach the unengaged and those who have been marginalized historically? And then make them answer the question again. And that list you have there, I think is probably very powerful. I could use it right now, I know some people need it, but then, people need to know it exists. And that takes money, and that takes purpose and time. So what's the budget for it too? Instead of, we're going to, how much money are you going to spend to let the people know?
So,
Yeah, I believe that's going to be part of the conversation.
maybe that's a good segue into the health disparities.
Let's
We're
keep
running
it
out of
moving.
time here.
Okay, we can move on.
But I also think too, like what you were saying is some people don't feel that it's for them because of lack of trust or whatever. And so in our health disparity subcommittee, there's a lot of discussion about how sort of the underlying issue for a lot of our subcommittee work is racial inequity, racial injustice. And so we need to figure out how we want to address that at the city level, what recommendations we want to make, which is what we're talking about. But we've talked about, and we talked a little bit about this last time, about having the city, recommending that the city declare racism a public health crisis. And then our report then serves as a playbook on how to address those issues moving forward, and all of our recommendations become sort of the playbook for how we want to address racism that's at the heart of all of our subcommittee issues. And so how do we do that? The other thing is the Racial Justice Committee is talking about and I'm calling it an equity department. I don't know what it's called, but they've talked about that. And so we as a subcommittee have also supported that. They've talked about looking at policy language, but then I think part of that would be to house some community health workers that could be the link to the knowledge gap for managing the social drivers of health for a lot of these people. The schools, the whoever could refer into this department, these community health workers. I even think education, like you could have community health workers going out and doing some early education, gaining some trust of these programs, and then getting them into the programs. And so it's equity, it's education, economic, all of those things that lead to health disparities. And so we really have to fix a lot of these things, racism. We have to fix a lot of these things that lead to, in order for us to be able to fix health disparities. So those are some of the things that we have continued to discuss. And one of the other things is data. And so we've talked about that in our report. There is data sort of at the state level. There are some county health rankings. Not a lot of the data is stratified by demographics. So we don't have, there's a lot of gaps in knowledge. And so from a health disparities standpoint, we need to figure out where the gaps are. And then once we identify what those gaps are, how do we want to use the data and how we want to move forward? What data do we want? What information we want? How do we want to use it? So that's really where we are. Most of our conversation has been around. I did have a chance to meet with Vivian Lasley-Bibbs, who's works in health equity at the state. She unfortunately could not come to our committee meeting, but basically echoed the same things that we'd already been discussing. Identify what tools are out there, the gaps in data. She also encouraged going to neighborhood associations, asking them what their pain points are as far as housing, health disparities, transportation, education, those kinds of things that could feed our recommendations to the council, or even our playbook for our report to the council. And I think that was really the high level overview. And I think I just want to add here recommendations that we are discussing would be declaring racism a public health crisis, using that to create a playbook to improve these areas, our sub-work areas. And then we would also like to recommend that the city provide information in multiple languages, or public service announcements that maybe would get out there that would be helpful, or like hanging things out there, but in multiple languages versus just maybe what we're already doing. And then propose that we really start collecting and reporting data stratified in a manner that could help us identify the gaps and where we would need resources improvements to really look at health disparities and health outcomes. So that's our high-level overview, very quickly.
You said something very powerful. One of the most powerful things I've heard you say. Declare racism as a public health issue. To who, by who, and then what would be like kind of the policy with teeth behind it? When we figure out there's a racist entity that's perpetrating this pervasive racism out here, that trauma, that's a great statement. I mean,
So yes, all of that. And it is more, like, when you do that, it's more symbolic than anything, but the teeth becomes when you start to have the advocacy and the gesture that is turned into action. And so it's us that are creating the recommendations for action by the council. So it's all of us coming together, making the recommendations, putting those into our report. And then I think too, if we can have like an equity department that oversees the language in the policies, is the language equitable for all? You know, because it talks about that. Yes, because we need to be able to be in an era where race no longer predicts life outcomes, and where outcomes for all groups are improved. And so we have to come up with the answer to that by, you know, outreach to people, gathering information, coming up where the gaps are and what are we going to do with the gaps, and then putting that into our playbook or our report for how we are recommending the city move forward to break down some of these barriers that have been created through systemic and all kinds of other structural
If I could add
racism.
to that, other cities have used this strategy.
Yep.
And if you think about it, you know, after a natural disaster and they say that this is a public emergency, then that unlocks the ability to put action toward it. So there are other cities that have made the declaration of racism as a public health crisis that really it's kind of jarring enough that now you can tie actions and expectations back to it.
And I feel like the CDC declared it a crisis some time ago.
Racism is a pandemic.
Pandemic. Yeah. But I just want to hop on to something that you said, just to kind of spread the concept around. I think many of us have heard of this thing called community health worker, but essentially it is a liaison that helps bridge the gap between the health entities and the community. Typically, they have ties to the community, so they have a ready-made form to enter, commune, things of that nature. I think that model of community health workers is something that needs to be duplicated across every channel that's trying to take action toward the pillars that we discussed as a commission. You know, I learned more about it recently, and I just think that it makes so much sense. And the things that we don't have as far as representation of marginalized communities or representation from an ethnic or racial background standpoint, having community health workers, community equity workers, community education workers,
All kinds of
having
things.
those things will force a bridging of the gap versus, you know, certain people just happen to go to certain colleges or work in certain career fields, so then they find themselves as a representation of the community. We'll be creating that. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I happen to know or found out that there's a group funded by UK called Promotoras. They're Hispanic health workers that have bridged the community, and now our Hispanic community is more willing to go and seek their help. But it was exactly that. It was a group of people, very focused within the community, that built the trust. Now, unfortunately, they only focus on health, but if we could expand to where they could.
Same concept.
Exactly, yes, sir.
Yep.
Fantastic.
She taught us so much about what we know from our committee about community health workers. Do you want to say what your experience was? When you were talking about it in relationship to the mobile grocery store
Yes.
too. Do you remember that conference?
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
We have one
No,
more.
that's okay. Excuse me.
We have one more report before we run out of time.
Yeah.
Mr. Timothy Johnson, racial equality.
I'm going to punt this actually to one of my other committee members because I actually wasn't at the last meeting.
So, well, I forget what's her name, Emily. She took all the notes. So
Erica, she's no
Erica.
longer with United Way, so I don't have those notes.
That's a problem.
She was a temp, so she graduated.
Well,
Oh,
so I don't
there
have
you go.
any of those
Sounds
written.
better.
I don't have any of those written down. But honestly, I would say a lot of it was around the report and what needs to go into the report, and so some of the same conversations about the department and the language in the policies, and so it was just more of the same. And the assessment, and so that's one question I had, and it's related to this because your group brought it up, doing that assessment, and we didn't. We wanted to wait, but with this, would it be a good time to put that into this report to get it on the city's forethought for the upcoming budget? So I think we put all of that into our report this time around so that they know about it. We can put in there about the department, the community health workers that could be underneath that to bridge the gap between all of the areas. And then I can't remember what else we had talked about in the past. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought
I
Erica
appreciate
was
you.
going to have those notes.
The video's up.
Yeah, the
Right.
video is up there, but
I think you captured it. I do.
yeah. So we
Thank
spent
you.
a lot of time talking about the report and what kind of report and how to use the data. So which is also what we talked about in the health equity, because it's the data that's going to be able to drive our recommendations and create a so-called playbook or recommendations for the council. So.
Okay, the old business.
Can I just say something
Oh,
real
I'm
quick
sorry.
on racial equity? I'm sorry, just
okay.
because I had an incident happen to me a couple weeks ago when I was in another state, in another city, where a young man walked up to me while I'm standing next to a person as a Caucasian, waiting for a car to be brought to me, valet, and the guy, he walked right past him to me and says, "Hey, by the way, where's your nearest parking lot for this hotel?" And I looked at him and said, "That's a great question. I don't know because I don't work here." But he assumed that I worked there because I was the black man standing there in front of the hotel next to the white man, right? So the white gentleman looked at me and he profusely started to apologize. He was stunned. He was stunned because he saw what happened. And I'm standing there with a suit and tie on going to a function, right? So he started to apologize. Hey, it's okay. I get it. I mean, that's part of being black, right? He just, man, I am really, really sorry. So it made me think about kind of just what you just talked about, is that maybe there's a possibility that we make a recommendation to our city council to state that all city employees take an unconscious bias training class, and that any institution that receives funds from the city, at least bare minimum, their heads of those organizations think we need to make people more aware. And whether that young man that walked up to me was conscious or unconscious, because he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I just thought you worked there," is what he said to me. He could have been unconscious. But if I had been another black man with a different attitude, that could have been a situation, right? The way he came to me. But I just was like, hey, nah. And again, so it just makes me aware that if we can at least start there, right, that we can ask our city to start holding themselves accountable, right, for being more aware. And then you want money from the city to do this X, Y, and Z, then you need to be no different from supplier diversity, right? That you want to be a resource from the city, then we want your suppliers to be more diverse, or X%. So it's just something I thought I'd share just because it hit me as you were talking about that.
Well, and to kind of also talk a little bit about that, we've talked about in the health disparity is one of the things that might be helpful is if we really identify where racism is within our subcommittees, like where is it still happening. We need to identify all of those areas, and then we can start to figure out how we make the recommendations to improve that. So if we can look at, where racism is in healthcare, well, we know, I could sit here and make you a whole list of where that is. Where is it in the housing market? Where is it in the law enforcement areas? Like, we can come up with a whole lot of places. Where is it in education? Like, there are lots of places where we see racism in all of our subcommittees. That, I think, would help drive us to get some answers as to how we move forward and we create a playbook or our recommendations.
I think the easy answer is it's everywhere.
It is absolutely.
That's the easy
It
answer.
is.
I think what
Absolutely.
you're talking about though is figuring out how we can take action in the places that it is based upon
Yes.
where it resides.
Yes.
And how to root it out. And I think it's
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We can do a sign.
Abdul, I love the point that you brought up. I think the city, in the last year, had all of its employees do some level of training. I don't know if it was implicit bias or what. One of our recommendations from our committee was to require all volunteers that serves on commissions, advisory boards, and others to do that. But I like your recommendation because it was one step further in saying that anyone who's receiving money from the city, at some level, also does that. So I would talk to my committee about it, but I would be in favor of that as well. Not just extending it to sort of the volunteer boards and commissions that do work on behalf of the city, but even to folks who are vendors or receiving some sort of monies from the city. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry, we're running out of time, I was trying to get to the number 3, but go ahead.
So as someone who delivers trainings like that, it's also really important to know that it's not an inoculation, that you don't go once and then it's done. At minimum for behavior change, we've got 3 interactions, at minimum. So also, maybe not just an awareness that bias exists, but some kind of dialogue sessions or some kind of conversation practice or something like that. Then we move from awareness into behavior change, which is where we ultimately hope to go.
Good point.
Okay, old business, bylaw approvals, have we approved that?
Well,
So these are the updated bylaws.
Does everyone have a copy?
yes.
I'll just say one more time for the record, because I've given up. I've been beaten down by this. There's still some of the changes that's not in this document, but at this point, I'm okay because I'm not going to sing this song anymore.
No. Well, give me your changes. We'll put this on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay,
It's really okay.
so
I've
we'll
been defeated.
have the discussion, we'll have the discussion next time. Well, does anybody have any questions? If not, I hope everybody had a nice 4th and enjoyed your day. So the meeting is adjourned at 4:54.
Need a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Get excited.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.